Would you prefer to kill your enemies or save your allies? This is the basic question that every aspiring Elder Scrolls Online PvPer should ask themselves as they embark on one of the game mode's two career paths, damage dealer or healer. While solo players will want to do both damage and healing, being effective in most types of group play will require you to put your focus on one or the other. Out of these two options, healing is often seen as the easier choice because anyone can slap on a restoration staff and start spamming a few heals. It's kind of like being the goalkeeper on a football team. It may not be the most prestigious or demanding role, but someone's gotta do it, right? If only it were that simple. Yes, being a healer is easy. Being a good healer? Not so much. In order to become a truly effective healer, you have to learn how to pull off dynamic, high-intensity rotations consistently through lag and heavy pressure, while also maintaining a good enough overview of the battle to be able to time your abilities to perfection. In short, being a good PvP healer is a tough challenge, but mastering the art of healing can make the difference between your group losing a fight or winning it. In this video, I want to cover all the basics of being a good PvP healer, from picking the right skills and ultimates to knowing how and when to use them. But before we start, a little about me. Why should I tell you what to do? I've not been a healer for a huge amount of time. I put together my first proper PvP healing build in August of 2022, mostly out of frustration over my Templar DD being nerfed into the ground. But while I may not have the years of healing experience that some have, I'm a pretty experienced PvPer who has played in a lot of different groups and knows how to move around the battlefield. I also know some very skilled healer and support mains who helped me a lot in the beginning, which allowed me to get to a respectable level of play relatively fast. As I was working actively on improving my healing game, I started to notice that there's not actually too many resources to turn to for PvP healers in ESO. Sure, there's a ton of healing builds out there of varying quality, but little information on how to actually play them. So I have two objectives for this video. First, I want to cover all the basics so you have enough knowledge to work with when it comes to building your own healer. I'm also doing this because there's a ton of things that I've seen people say about healers that's either outdated, incomplete, or was never true to begin with. Second, I want to tell you more about how to play, like how to move, whom to heal, as this is information you're currently kind of forced to just figure out by yourself. And yeah, you will still have to get out there yourself and practice, but with a few pointers, at least you won't have to reinvent the wheel all by yourself. So hopefully I can give aspiring or struggling healers a nudge in the right direction. This means that my video is not an in-depth build video. I will highlight all of the ingredients of a healing build like raise, skills and useful sets, but I won't cook up an entire build, as the build that's best for you depends on too many variables. What kind of PvP you do, who you play with, etc. I'm also not a theory crafter, so I prefer talking about general important principles rather than builds that have been min-maxed to a T. Finally, and I promise we'll get to work after this, it is important to know that I'm an open world PvPer, so a good 99% of my healing is done in various forms of Cyrodiil group play. I will do my best to tell you which parts of my advice might not work optimally for solo play, battlegrounds, or Imperial City brawling, and come up with alternatives for those situations. But just know that that is not how I typically play. So, without further delay, let's move on to the 10 things you should know as a PvP healer in Elder Scrolls Online. Know what your job is, and isn't. Some may think that a healer's job is simply to heal people, but it's a little more complicated than that. You can just press a burst heal whenever someone's health runs low, but there's so much more that you can do. As a healer, you should be constantly rotating your skills to keep your heal over time skills, or HOTS, ticking, even when the entire group is at full health. This gives the group a buffer of constant passive healing, on top of which you can activate burst heals when there's more pressure. We'll talk more about how to optimize this later. Another part of the healer's toolkit is buffs and debuffs. Depending on your class, skills and setup, you may be able to give your group members useful buffs, such as added resources, spell and weapon damage, or resistance to certain types of incoming damage. In a similar vein, you might be able to apply equivalent debuffs to enemy players. There's a bunch of other things that healers can bring to the table, such as ultis that can help give your group an edge, Some players will also provide their DDs with synergies. Examples are Templars, who can help bomb enemies with their Solar Prison ulti, or Necromancers, who can do the same with their Boneyard ability. Note that Boneyard will be nerfed for update 37 in March 2023. The same goes for the synergy-focused jewelry trait, Harmony, so it remains to be seen how much of a role synergies will play going forward. The overall point is, though, that a healer's toolkit is so versatile that it would be more accurate to call them supports. But seeing as there are also separate support builds that focus less on healing output, I shall continue to use the term healer for this video to avoid confusion. Now, are there any tasks you shouldn't be carrying out as a healer? Yes. Logically, while a healer can provide some offensive capability, killing enemies is ultimately the job of the damage dealers. This also means you shouldn't activate damage-oriented synergies yourself, as those are more lethal in the hands of a DD. Also, much like in PvE, resurrecting fallen allies is preferably something left to DDs, seeing as healers would have to interrupt their own healing to get the res, making the entire group more vulnerable in the process. Sometimes having to resurrect someone as a healer can't be avoided, but given the choice, you should leave the resing to the DDs and simply heal up recently resurrected allies. Finally, unless instructed otherwise, healers generally shouldn't be the ones to stun, root or snare enemies. DDs need to be able to line up their combos, and if a healer stuns a bunch of enemies at the wrong time, the temporary crowd control immunity they gain as a result might totally ruin the incoming burst of an ally DD. Know what class to pick. Now that we know what a healer's job is, what class can do it the best? As will be a running theme with a lot of these questions, the answer starts with "it depends." What the best choice is for your healing class will vary depending on what's already available in your group. Some classes can provide unique buffs, but if there's already a DD or another healer in your group providing that same class buff, it becomes less beneficial for you to run that class as well. That said, let's focus in on each of the classes and look at their strengths and weaknesses. Note that the Arcanist class is not yet available as of the making of this video, but I'll probably end up making a separate video on Arcanist healing somewhere down the line. As of update 36, Nightblades and Sorcerers both provide strong healing. The Nightblade has an insane burst heal with Healthy Offering and a powerful healing ultimate with Soul Siphon. Meanwhile, Sorcerers can generate strong passive healing through Power Surge and can provide additional utility with the Negate ultimate. In bygone days, Templars were a no-brainer when it came to picking a healing class, but it's no longer the undisputed number one in this department. That being said, Templars can still offer some great utility with their strong ultimates, and thanks to their amazing burst heal, Ritual of Rebirth, they can heal in a radius around them, which makes positioning relatively easy. As a result, Templars can generate a lot of healing while also being beginner friendly. Wardens have an entire skill tree dedicated to healing, so it's not difficult to make a competent Warden healing build. Their healing ultimate, Healing Thicket, is cheap and fairly effective. Wardens excel at providing a range of buffs and debuffs, but with Warden DDs being abundant as of update 36, it might not always be necessary for a healer to provide those. Necromancers are much like Wardens in that they have enough tools in their kit to make for a solid healer, but their worth depends on the number of Necromancers already present in the group. They can provide DDs with the Grave Robber synergy from the aforementioned Boneyard ability, but I don't expect it to be used much after its nerf. Necromancers also generally get less healing per second, or HPS, than Nightblades, Templars and Sorcerers, so they currently wouldn't be my go-to choice for a healer. At the time of recording this video, Dragon Knights are without a doubt the worst class for healing, and they have been for a considerable time. The skill kit of this class is oriented away from healing and more towards tankiness. The main appeal of having a decay in your group is that they can easily provide your group with a major brutality and sorcery buff, which adds 20% weapon and spell damage. On top of that, they have the unique minor brutality buff, which adds another 10% of weapon damage. But these advantages fade as soon as you have a Dragon Knight DD in your group, which is nearly always. So yeah, you can still build a decent Dragon Knight healer if you really want to, but you would nearly always be better off simply picking another class. Ultimately though, I just try going with the class that feels best for you and see if it is suitable for your ambitions as a healer. I mainly heal on Templar as that's what I was playing at the time when I created my first healing build. Maybe I could technically get more HPS out of a sorcerer, but Temper just feels more natural to me at the moment. Know what race to pick. So, we now know about the classes, but what race is best for healers? I find that this choice is the one that most comes down to personal preference. Most of the guides out there will just tell you to roll an Argonian and call it a day. But while good, I don't think that the 6% healing bonus makes it the only good choice, or even the best one. Especially now that healers use both Magicka and Stamina based skills, more on that in a minute, it's an advantage to go with a race that offers something extra to hybrid resource pools, such as Altmer or Dunmer. The same goes for races like Imperial or Breton, whose passives involve cost reduction, meaning it is easier to manage your resources. Then there's Nords, who are able to easily generate ultimate in combat, while also receiving some buffs for their attributes and resistances. In short, there's a lot of passives that will come in handy in one way or the other. Cost reduction, attribute bonuses and recovery boosts make it easier to sustain your skill rotation. Extra spell and weapon damage will translate into stronger heals, extra healing done speaks for itself, and ultimate regeneration is always valuable. My current healers are Dunmer and Breton respectively, as that's what they were before I created healing builds for them. But if I had to pick a race now, based solely on the passives, I'd go with Imperial for the cost reduction or with Nord for the ultimate regeneration. Sure, the flat healing bonus that Argonians get is great, but especially in organized group play, getting an ultimate up just 1 or 2 seconds earlier may literally turn a full raid wipe into a casualty-free enemy push. As I said earlier though, race is, more than any of the other aspects, up to personal preference and it won't make or break your build. Know what skills to pick. As a healer, it is always important to ask yourself what any given skill brings to your group. As such, a heal that heals only you and maybe one other ally will be less useful than a heal that can affect your entire group. This is different from battlegrounds and small scales, or other situations where you might be more of a pocket healer, but for larger groups, try to avoid running too many selfish skills. So, let's take a look at some of the skills that are both useful and available to any class. I'll go through them from most to least essential. Echoing Vigor. This heal over time is part of the Assault skill line, and it is the best heal of its kind. The more players keep this up at all times, the more survivable the group will be. In most ball groups, everyone, including the DDs, will have this skill and keep it up at all times. This technique of letting everybody run an active heal over time is known as hot stacking, and it's a large reason of why such groups are so tough to kill. Even as a solitary healer, this skill will be a great boon to your group. It's cast in a radius, so try to apply it while in the middle of your group. Mind that, unlike most other healing skills, Echoing Vigor costs stamina. Radiating Regeneration. The other ubiquitous heart is not as strong as it once was, but it can still be very useful, especially when applied in combination with Echoing Vigor. Regen is applied to you and or 3 nearby allies. Because of this, it's important to consider the number of people in your group. If you're in a group of 3, 1 cast will be enough. In a group of 4 to 6, 2 casts should do it, and so forth. I personally just spam this as much as possible when all my other skills are ticking and a burst heal is not needed. Healing Springs. Like the previous ability, Healing Springs is found in the Restoration Staff skill tree. It's a ground-based HUD that you can use whenever your group is somewhat stationary. It provides a decent amount of healing, and it will also boost your Magicka recovery. This makes it the superior choice over the other morph, Illustrious Healing. While Illustrious Healing lasts longer, this is barely an advantage in the dynamic mobile combat of PvP. Illustrious Healing used to do more healing per second than Healing Springs, but since a few patches, the morphs have been more or less equal in this regard. Note that this was a pretty subtle change, and many guides out there might still recommend Illustrious Healing. Necrotic Orb. The orbs from the Undaunted skill line can either heal allies or damage foes in their path, and allies can also activate the synergy of the skill to restore both Magicka and Stamina. Regardless of which morph you choose, orbs are often an essential part of group sustain. Blessing of Restoration. By itself, Blessing of Restoration is a solid burst heal, and a good option if your class offers no better alternative. But its true power lies in the buff it provides. Hitting an ally with Blessing will give them minor resolve for 20 seconds, increasing their physical and spell resistance. Inner Light. This ability from the Mage's Guild skill line provides several advantages. The most important one is that it gives you Major Savagery on the bar on which it is slotted, which improves your critical chance. Critical heals will heal for more, so more critical heals means more healing. This morph also gives you a 5% Magicka bonus, which, while not amazing, is always useful. Personally, I always try to run this skill on my main healing bar for its passive bonuses. Purge. Purge can remove up to 3 negative effects from you and your group. This includes debuffs and dots, or damage over time. This makes it a good skill to use during sieges, although it costs quite a bit of Magicka. However, and this is very important, I would only use this skill on the Ravenwatch campaign, where proc sets do not work. Otherwise, using this skill might also proc the Plague Break set, which can wipe your entire group if you're unlucky. So for the time being, only use this on Ravenwatch. Siege Shield. As the name kinda gives away, this skill is used to protect your group from enemy siege fire, reducing their damage by a whopping 50%. However, this is a very expensive skill to cast, so usually there will be only one designated support running this. Looking at these skills, I would slot Echoing Vigor, Radiating Regeneration and Healing Springs on any healing build, regardless of class or group composition. The utility of the remaining skills depends on the situation. Know what ultimates to pick. A healer's ultimate is what gives a bit of flavor to the build. You can choose to slot a defense-oriented ulti to aid with your healing, or you can run an offense-oriented ulti to help with pushing against the enemy. I'll go through a few options you can consider, starting with general ultimates and then class-specific ones. First we have Life Giver, a Restoration Staff ultimate that is able to single-handedly get an ally from the brink of death up to full health. It also adds different buffs from the Restoration Staff skills, so be sure to morph all skills in the Restoration skill tree, even if you do not plan on slotting them. The major downside of this ultimate is that you can only apply it to one player at a time, and you can't control who it is, as it will default to the lowest health player in your immediate surrounding. Then we have Barrier. Either morph of Barrier is often used by organized PvP groups. It offers the group a strong damage shield that can last up to 30 seconds. Ideal for a push into the enemy's heart or in case of emergency when your group is taking a lot of damage. Be aware though that it is a relatively expensive ultimate and that it will only be applied to members in your group and in your immediate surrounding. This makes the ulti less suited for healing multiple groups and all but useless for solo healing. You can however slot this ultimate on your front bar simply to boost your Magicka recovery thanks to the passives from the support skill tree. On a similar note, you can choose to slot either Temporal Guard, the Psijic ulti, or Dawnbreaker, the Fire's Guild ulti, on your front bar as passives, as having those skills slotted will respectively offer you damage reduction or more spell and weapon damage while you're on that bar. Now let's take a look at some of the class ultimates. Templars have very strong ultimates, both offensively and defensively. Currently, Solar Prison, often referred to by its base skill name of Nova, offers the strongest damage synergy in the game. Mind that the skill by itself is kinda useless, so a DD needs to activate the synergy for this to be worth slotting. As I said before, the nerf to the Harmony trait might make this ultimate less potent going forward. Templars also have Practiced Incantation, which is a very strong group heal that lasts for 8 seconds and renders both you and your group very hard to kill for its duration. The caster also cannot be stunned or interrupted during its use. Mind that your movement speed will be reduced while casting, and that you cannot use dodge roll or block without cancelling the ultimate. An enemy negate will also cancel it. Despite these drawbacks, it's an extremely strong and also cheap heal that is basically a group-based version of Life Giver, and a strong contender for the best healing ultimate in big groups. Sorcerers also have good in the ultimate department. Either morph of negate or even the unmorphed version will create an area of effect or AoE in which enemy AoE effects are cancelled while also silencing all enemies within it. Being silenced means they cannot cast spells. This makes negate a valuable support tool that can render enemy pushes toothless. Necromancers have a unique ultimate with renewing animation, which allows the immediate resurrection of up to 3 fallen allies. While this sounds and often is amazing, it is one of the most expensive ultimates in the game, so its use should be restricted to emergencies. And while Necros have a super expensive ulti, Wardens have a super cheap one with Healing Thicket. It provides a decent ground heal, and this particular morph will also continue healing players after they leave the ultimates area. Nightblades, meanwhile, have access to one of the strongest healing ultimates in the game, Soul Siphon. It gives nearby allies a strong heal over time and also enables the major vitality buff, increasing their healing received by 16% for a duration of 4 seconds. To ensure the ulti going off, you can drink an immovability potion right before casting it. A more risky move would be to drink a potion right after casting this ulti, as Nightblades will restore ultimate by doing so. Dragon Knights do not have any ultimates that directly aid healers, though they could consider slotting standard to help while pushing an enemy group. Know what sets to pick. Now that you have selected your class, your race and your skill bars, it's time to look at gearing your healer up. Let's talk about a few general principles first. For weapons, I mostly go for a restoration staff on both bars, with both having the powered trait. This will simply give us the most raw healing with no real drawbacks. In a small scale or a battleground, you can also make a pure defensive back bar with a sword and shield. This will result in lower healing, but might be necessary for your own survival. However, this should not be needed when healing big groups or ball groups. On that note, I personally always go for 2 support sets, meaning sets that buff my group in some way. This can mean a boost to their damage or their resistances, or for example an increase of the group's overall healing. Some of the most vital support sets include sets such as Spell Power Cure, Powerful Assault, and Ropes of Transmutation. But if one of my group members is already wearing those, then it is not necessary for me to wear them as well. So which sets I wear depends on what the group I'm in has slotted. For example, for small scale and AoE group healing, I currently wear Sanctuary and Rallying Cry, as other healers and supports already have the other essential sets covered. So, if you are in a coordinated group, discuss with the other supports to decide on which sets are needed. If you are the only healer, then Spell Power Cure and Powerful Assault will already offer an enormous advantage to the group. These sets also need to be activated on one bar only, and the bonus will carry over when bar swapping. This effectively allows you to run set A on your front bar and set B on your back bar, giving you space to slot other things such as monster sets and/or mythics. Speaking of which, monster sets you should generally consider slotting are Symphony of Blades and Earthcore, as they bolster your group's resources and your healing respectively. In terms of mythics, generally the choice is between the Ring of Mark and Majesty, for slightly stronger heals and better resistances, and Snow Treaders. Now, Snow Treaders give you immunity from snares, which is very beneficial to your effectiveness as a healer, as well as to your stamina management. Especially when fighting outnumbered, you'll be snared constantly, which can make it difficult to maintain a good uptime on Echoing Vigor, since both of those things do a number on your stamina pool. And an empty stamina pool means you're a sitting duck. However, Snow Treaders also make you unable to sprint while in combat, so if you don't have a designated group member to cast speed skills, this might make you fall behind on a group, so I'd only recommend using Snow Treaders if you're part of a more organized group that accounts for its drawbacks. There are some arena weapons that can be worth slotting. The most important one is the Master's Restoration Staff, which can help with your group's sustain. Finally, if you are playing on Ravenwatch and only have access to non-proc sets, building a healer is pretty straightforward. Slot Heartland Conqueror with either Amber Plasm or Healer's Habit, depending on whether or not your class has easy access to the Minor Mending passive. You can also use Wild Hunt to boost your mobility. Before we move on, please keep in mind that the advice I just gave for building mainly pertains to the healing of large groups and organized groups. If you are solo or in a battleground, it may be necessary to run only one support set, such as Spell Power Cure, and make the other set a defensive set, such as Mars Bomb or Pariah. Generally speaking, your objective as a healer is to provide as much healing and as many buffs as possible without it resulting in unnecessary deaths for yourself. So if you are unsure on what to do, just go all out on a healing-oriented build to see if you can get away with it, and build in extra defenses if there is no other option. Know how to manage your resources. One of the most important parts of being a healer is sustain. That is, learning how to cast all of your skills without running out of resources. How well you are able to sustain depends on your skill, but also various aspects of your build. So let's start with the basics, your attributes. In ESO, you have 3 attributes: Health, Stamina, and Magicka. A fully leveled player has 64 attribute points available to them, that can be spread over any of these attributes. As a healer, your main attribute is Magicka, seeing as most of your healing skills will cost Magicka. Still, this does not mean that you should just put all 64 points into Magicka. The start of any good PvP build is a decent health pool. If your max health is too low, someone might be able to kill you before you even have a chance to respond. Generally, for no CP builds I try to go for a minimum of 30k health when fully buffed, so that includes buff food. For CP Cyrodiil, I try to go for 32k health minimum. How I get there depends on racial passives, class, skill slotted and buff food, but generally speaking I tend to put 30 points into health and 34 into Magicka. I will also run prismatic glyphs or tri-set glyphs on all armor pieces. This means that I may well end up with a Magicka pool as low as 25k, but in the current meta, having a large Magicka pool is not necessary as long as your sustain is good. Which raises the question, how much Magicka recovery do you need on a healer? There's no straight answer to this as it depends on too many variables. Race, class, group composition and so forth. What I aim for myself is a minimum of 2k Magicka recovery during active combat. So with buffs from sets, food and skills such as healing springs, but without the use of a potion. Stamina recovery also cannot be ignored on a healer, especially if you run Echoing Vigor, which you should. Again, the number you want depends on a ton of variables, but I find that upwards of around 800 stamina recovery is acceptable. One thing you can do in order to find your own sustain sweet spot is to run 2 Magicka recovery glyphs and 1 prismatic recovery glyph on your jewelry. If you feel like you have enough sustain, you replace one of the glyphs with a weapon or spell damage glyph. Rinse, repeat. Buff food can also help you with your sustain. Orzorga's Wrath Frothar gives you a ton of Magicka recovery as well as pure health. Orzorga's Smoked Bear Haunch and Jewels of Misrule, meanwhile, boost the sustain of both Magicka and stamina. The best option for food is Bewitched Sugar Skulls, but it buffs your primary resource pools rather than your sustain, so you should make sure you don't run out of juice while using this. The finishing touch is given by potions. As a healer, I mostly only run 2 types of potions. I either run tri-stat potions, so potions that give back health, Magicka and stamina, or I run immovability potions, which make me immune to stuns while also giving me back health or Magicka. I mainly use the latter in more organized groups and only when my stamina pool is over 50% full. Some healers use the Atronic Mundus Stone to boost their Magicka recovery, but I would always use the Ritual Mundus Blessing and solve any sustain issues through other methods. Know when to heal. As we have discussed earlier, it's important to keep your HUDs running, so Echoing Vigor, Radiating Regeneration, and, when stationary, Healing Springs. Do this even when the group is not under any direct threat, and only stop casting once your group wants to mount up and travel to another place on the map. This provides your group with a buffer should they suddenly come under attack. Then you won't have to waste those vital first seconds of an ambush applying your HUDs, so you can move straight on to burst heals. When healing your group, try to position yourself within their range but outside of direct fire. Usually this is behind the group when they face an enemy charge. What separates a great healer from a decent one is their ability to anticipate incoming damage. A beginner will be purely reactive and start mashing the burst heal button only when allied health pools are already beginning to drop. An experienced healer has developed a feeling for when this damage will hit and has a burst heal ready for the moment the first damage abilities hit the group. You should save your ultis for big moments. You can learn all of this simply by playing Cyrodiil a lot and learning how pushes work, and how and when to alternate between offensive and defensive phases. Try to anticipate where the enemy kill zone will be and carpet it with heals, all the while keeping your HUDs running. To reiterate, HUDs are the bread and butter of your healing. Therefore, a good uptime on HUDs is the basis for a good healing performance. Organized groups will often want to see an uptime on Radiating Regeneration of 70% or more, and an uptime on Echoing Vigor of 80% or more. So if you manage this, you already have a pretty good fundament. From there, just learn how to move with your group and learn how to adapt to each situation. Healing in PvP is a combination of routine and adaptability, and the best healers are dynamic while never falling below a certain threshold with their rotation. Know whom to heal. Now that we know when to heal, how do we know whom to heal? It goes without saying that the more people you heal, the better it is. But within the reality of Cyrodiil, it's not always possible to keep everyone covered, so you need to learn how to prioritize targets. Players who are under heavy pressure usually require more healing, But as a healer, you always need to consider where, how, and on whom to spend your resources, as even with great sustain, they aren't limitless. To start with, focus on your group and guild members before random allies. A coordinated group that stays alive is more dangerous than a bunch of ungrouped players who only answer to themselves. Even within your group, you can set priorities. First of all, keep yourself alive, because dead players do 0 HPS. Also keep an eye on any other healers in your group, as well as the group leader, as they're the most important to group survivability. Now, despite all the blame the healer memes, each group member has some responsibility over their own survival. They need to have a viable health pool, use buff food, use potions, have a self-heal or a shield, and defend themselves when pressured. In short, don't waste your precious resources on a 20k health bozo who is glued to a siege while being under enemy fire. Focusing your healing on players like that is futile, as they'll probably die anyway, and it siphons healing away from the rest of the group. Know how to improve. If you want to become a truly good healer, you must be able to look at yourself critically and find out which aspects of your gameplay need some work. This can be done simply by observing your own gameplay and seeing if you're keeping people alive. This is not a foolproof method, as some players just can't be saved, but it is always good to remain aware of your own gameplay. The next step would be recording your own gameplay. This allows you to evaluate your own performance after the chaos of battle has settled, and you can look at yourself with a bit more objectivity. If you're on PC, you can use add-ons to track your healing. Combat metrics will allow you to see the HPS that you're doing in any given fight, while RDK Group Tool, among other things, tells you the percentage of the healing that you're doing in the group. The catch is that RDK will only divide the healing between players who have the add-on running. So if no one uses RDK, you will always do 100% of the healing, which sounds great, but it doesn't really tell you anything. By far the most reliable way for PC players to track their healing performance is to run ESO logs, or to get someone else to run them. ESO logs allow you to see pretty much any information you can think of, from uptimes to healing done per skill and buff uptimes. You kind of have to learn how to read logs, but once you are able to, every session will give you concrete information on what you can improve to do even better next time. Finally, you can simply ask for feedback. Experienced players, especially healers, might be able to give you some pointers on your setup, your skill bars, your movement, and any other aspect of your healing. Just ask others about anything you might still be unsure about. In order to improve as a healer, you can select a combination of methods that you are comfortable with. The more you use, the more accurate your assessment will be. Of course, not everyone will be willing to sift through hours worth of logs to find that extra 5% of healing, so just set your own goals and try to have fun. So, there we have it. 10 things you should know as a PvP healer in the Elder Scrolls Online. I hope that this video will contribute to a rising number of kick-ass healers in Cyrodiil, the Imperial City, and Battlegrounds. Keep in mind that the advice that I've compiled here is the result of my own experience trying to up my game as a healer. If you found a way to do things differently, then all the power to you. Us supports need to stick together. All that remains for me now is to thank my fellow healer Lori for helping me out with the written guide that this video is based on, and for helping me improve my healing in general. If you have any questions about healing in Cyrodiil, or you can think of any more things that you think every PvP healer should know, feel free to put them in the comments below. See you on the battlefield.